Hey everyone, good day to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. Back again with another upper review today, looking at the Wolf A1, specifically the 12.5 inch upper receiver group. This is a near clone of the Taiwanese T91, which is their current service rifle, though caveat on that, it's currently being replaced by the T112. But I do want to specifically emphasize this is a near clone. There's a lot of minor differences with the Wolf A1 compared to an actual T91. But one very key difference that I will touch on is the barrel is US made, given a lot of the ATF import restrictions, regulations. I've had a really good shooting experience with this thus far. I have about 2,000 rounds on it, so quite a bit more than my usual reviews. I want to go in kind of my usual order for reviews, going from the most important stuff to the least important, and kind of the more nitty-gritty from there. But I want to start by talking about reliability, and I'm also going to kind of mix in a bit of a discussion on the shooting experience overall as I've been handling this upper. So starting out, just reliability thus far has been 100% reliable. Wolf does kind of say you might need a break-in period. I didn't really experience that at all. Right out the box, shot perfectly, and to this point, it's still shooting perfectly. One thing on their whole break-in, because I was reading other reviews, so when you first get this, I would highly recommend doing an extremely deep clean of the bore, because something with how they assemble them, I think what I read is they let them sit for a while in storage before they assemble the whole upper, and they use some pretty much like a congealing type of oil that really gums it up. And when I inspected mine, I had to actually re-clean it a lot before it would really finally come out. I had to use some pretty aggressive cleaners, so that's not great there. What I've read from some other reviews is you might get some of that crap oil congealed in your kind of chamber area, which can cause problems, and that's probably why they say you might need a break-in for it. Mine luckily just had kind of some of that crap down towards the end, so I cleaned it up. What I wanted to talk about next though, so regarding that 100% reliability, this is an extremely overgassed upper. So I've been using this with actually a 416 buffer and 416 spring, which is one of the heavier ones out there for sure. But I would say if you get one of these, just put in the heaviest spring and probably the heaviest buffer you can put in as well. But especially that spring. Well, this kicks quite a bit, especially for just being a 5.56. To put this into comparison, if any of you are familiar with like the older 416s, especially the ones from prior to when they started venting, like the very original ones, this feels about the same as far as recoil compared to those. So it is quite a lot. And if you look right here at the gas block, so when I first picked this up, I thought that there must be some kind of adjustment on the gas block, but this is actually totally fixed. What you see here that looks sort of like a knob, that is actually how you disassemble your piston, because this actually comes out the front. So what you would do, which I can't show because YouTube is dumb and they've actually been cracking down lately, so I don't want to risk it at all, but pretty much you would push this in from here, turn it 180, then you can turn the front cup. This is the actual piston itself, is all self-contained. You turn that 180 and then you can slide the whole assembly out the front, and it's kind of interesting compared to a lot of the other short stroke gas piston rifles out there on the market. Usually they kind of have like an exposed spring, and pretty much nothing is too different, but this actually has an outer sleeve around the piston, which is just kind of cool, and seems like a good idea to help prevent the ingress of dirt and debris from getting into the piston and gumming that all up. Now, despite it being so overgassed, I did shoot this a lot suppressed. If you do want to suppress this, I would highly recommend putting in a gas busting charging handle. So I'm using a Radian SD in here. This ships with a genuine T91 charging handle, which it's made in Taiwan, but it's literally just a mil-spec charging handle, and a lot of gas does escape through this point right here. So you'll probably want something like this. But even then, with how overgassed this is, if you want to suppress this a lot, you're still going to feel a lot in your eye, I've found, even with this. So it's not the best suppressor host if you're looking at it for that purpose. And last thing on the shooting experience, if you do want to shoot this with an FRT, this does use a full bolt carrier group, so you can put in an FRT and it will work with it. I did test it, just ran one mag through it with mine, and it runs. Like I said, I didn't really want to do it too much just because of how much muzzle rise there is. It's not the most pleasant for that sort of purpose. It's quite hard to control, but it's doable, and I'm sure if you really wanted to tune it a bunch, you'd get it to where it's fairly reasonable. I did want to move on now and talk about the maximum precision that this upper is capable of. So I did mostly one of my normal precision tests The reason I say mostly, so normally what I like to do for my precision test is I take 10 rounds of a whole bunch of different grain weights of ammo. So did the same sort of thing with this, but usually I like to use a bipod. I actually just shot this off of a rear bag and a front bag instead, and the reason for that is this is not a free floating handguard. So if you want to do precision stuff with this, I'm not aware of a single free floating handguard out there. There are some aftermarket handguards. I'll talk about that more later as well. But to my knowledge, I don't know of a single one that free floats it. But I'm going to cut in that footage right now so you'll see all the precision stuff that I did. 75 grain Hornady Super Performance at the top left bullseye, 10 rounds, loaded right here. Next group I'll be firing is 77 grain Burger OTMs. 10 rounds loaded right here. I do want to point out and stress, of course, this is a precision test, not an accuracy test. It's very important, not just semantic difference. Those last rounds I did were pretty far to the left and down. Again, doesn't really matter because I'm just measuring the group size, but almost off paper, so I did adjust the zero. I did zero this with MA55, PMC MA55. So it might be slightly off still, but I'm just hoping to be a little closer to the center so that they don't go off the paper, of course, and make it difficult to measure. But here we go, firing these at the top right. So those first two groups were factory rounds. This next one I have is my 69 grain zero tip Match King hand loads. Traditionally, these shoot the best in every rifle I've tested them in, so this will, I think, be a pretty good benchmark. Then again, you know, not every rifle is going to like the same type of rounds, but we'll see. And they'll fire these at the bottom left. Last one here is going to be another hand load. These are 69 grain Barnes match burners at the bottom right. 10 rounds. So as you saw, not really that great of precision, kind of hovering around 3-ish MOA, I would say, which is acceptable. But again, not great. Given that this is kind of built as a service rifle, you know, even with the US made barrel still kind of set up that way, I think it's passable. I usually like having at least 2 MOA, especially for, you know, as you get out to say 200 even, or especially like 300 or 400 yards, which the round is capable of, but at those distances with that sort of spread, it gets pretty difficult to make an actual hit on target. So again, I would wish for more, but it's not the worst I've seen either. But now talking about the barrel, so that is the main reason I think that this has issues with the precision. So I'm going to put in the bore scope footage from when I first got this, and overall just a lot of problems with this barrel. It is still 4150 steel, which is good. Oddly, they don't advertise that fact very much. I don't know why. It's a perfectly acceptable steel type for a barrel, mil spec, so no issues with that. Nitrided and actually hammer forged, but if you look at the chamber, for instance, that's quite rough. Not, again, not the roughest I've seen, not the worst, but not a good polished and really smooth chamber either. There's some extreme roughness right about here. When I first noticed that, I thought it was just that congealed oil that I was mentioning earlier, so I scrubbed it, but it's still there. There's just some messed up with the barrel right around this area. Again, I don't know how exactly long it is. It feels like it's about this long when I either run the bore scope over it or like a cleaning patch. I can feel it either way, and it's very, very rough. First, a few other things on this barrel. So Wolf does offer this in 3 different barrel lengths. They have a 12.5, a 14.5, which is actually the clone correct version, which I will touch on in a second, because if you look that up online, it's going to give you a different answer. But then they give you, or the third option is a 16.5 as well. So going back just a sec then, that 14.5, if you are trying to build a T91 clone, you will want to go with that barrel length. So if you look online, The full barrel length that you'll see on a bunch of like Wikipedia and a bunch of other just online encyclopedias, they'll say it's, I think usually 16.3, but even then I'm seeing like some variation between 16.1, 16.3, and 16.5. But point is, all the online sources give around 16 inches as the barrel length. But if you look at the way that they measured it, they're including the flash hider. So that's actually a 14.5 with the flash hider. And that's actually another good point for me to mention. This ships with pretty much a very extended A2 flash hider on here. Oddly, it was very clocked on the one I got, and almost every other video and picture review that I've seen online of other people's Wolf A1s, they always seem to be slightly clocked. Mine was kind of going this direction, so I don't know what was up with that. I of course did replace it with a Plan B muzzle device so I can actually use my suppressor on here. But if you're actually going for clone correctness, the actual T91s use kind of more of a combination device of a comp and flash hider. So if you look at those, pretty much the same sort of thing with like it looking like an extended A2, but then they actually have a few holes drilled in the top here to help to combat the muzzle rise a little bit. And if you look closely at the gas block here, there's also quite a few differences between the Wolf A1 and the genuine T91 gas block. So first off, there is no bottom Picatinny, which the real ones have, despite the handguard actually having the little cutout you can kind of see right there, which is for the Picatinny to fit into. But second of all, interestingly, the Wolf A1 front sight is actually rather extra tall on here. And the reason that they did that was that you can use a standard AR-15 front sight, or rear sight back here. I'm just using a Scalar Works right now. And the reason they had to make this whole thing a little bit taller is that the upper receiver rail height itself is a little bit taller to make room for the piston that's under here compared to a normal AR-15 direct gas or internal piston. For how high exactly this is, again, I always default to the 416 because I'm so used to that, and it's pretty much the exact same height as on that. Again, if you're used to it, it's slightly different. If you're used to, say, a 1.7 optic height on an AR, you'll probably want to go with a 1.5 to approximate a similar sort of feel on this one. And also, this is a fixed front sight, you can see. Again, I actually thought that this was a folding front sight because I saw this knob and I thought, oh, maybe you use that to push the sight down, but you do not, unfortunately. If you do want to change, the front sight post is just your normal A2 right there. So I'm nearly done talking about the barrel. I know I have a lot in this section, but last thing I wanted to talk about is the barrel profile. So some of the older reviews I saw on the Wolf A1 were saying that this has a heavy barrel profile. So I don't know if maybe the first ones that they started importing and building were a heavier profile, but this currently, this is just a 0.625 inch diameter. So pretty much a pencil profile. I did measure it here as well as underneath the handguard, and it does taper up a little bit for the gas block, but you know, it drops down immediately on both sides. So it's a pretty thin profile. Despite that, this is actually still quite barrel heavy. Even compared to like a 416, I would say that this is probably the most heavy duty, heavy profile type of piston setup that I've used on a AR type short stroke gas pistons. Surprisingly, despite the barrel profile being so thin, I actually found no difference in MOA shift between shooting this unsuppressed versus suppressed. So, you know, there probably would be a bit more shift at longer distances, but as far as 100 and in, I'm seeing no perceptible shift whatsoever on here. And maybe that's more so due in part to this being so short, it's just less leverage. But either way, I was surprised by it because I was expecting there to be at least a little bit of shift. That's actually a really good point for me to transition to talking about the handguard. So this is a pretty limiting factor of this upper. There are, like I said earlier, aftermarket handguards you can get, but there's not very many. This has its own sort of handguard system, which isn't compatible with anything else out on the market. So if you want to stick with the original handguard, of course, you can see there's no Picatinny available on here, but one option, you can mount a tri-rail Picatinny adapter. So how that installs is you have these two holes right here, you can see. So you can screw that in, and then you just have a little small top section of Picatinny and then two on the sides. Another thing actually kind of interesting that I've seen a few people do is you can do a little bit of cutting, surprisingly not actually even that much, but you can actually jury rig just hemlock T-nuts to fit through the cooling holes right here. It's a very, very close fit even without any cutting. I did test it with one of my flashlight mounts, and it's, yeah, it would probably work pretty well if you were up to just doing a slight modification there. I'm leaving mine just completely as is, but yeah, worth noting if you want to go that route. Otherwise, if you want to mount a flashlight to this and kind of make it a more serious use type of rifle, I've seen a lot of people do kind of a Gordon carbine type of setup where they just do a barrel mount of the light right about there. So you are either way pretty limited. Moving back now, talking a little bit about the upper receiver itself. So this is rather minimal, probably compared to a lot of the other AR uppers that you're probably used to seeing. So two things. This doesn't really have, or it technically has a very minimal brass deflector, but there's no really big brass deflector. Again, with how overgassed this is, it's kicking all the spent cases way in front of me consistently. But if you're a left-handed shooter, I'd still worry about that a little bit, because you just have this little rib here behind the ejection port cover, you can see. And also, no forward assist. One thing interesting is actually this uses a standard AR barrel extension. So you could, in theory, if you have the aptitude or you know a really good gunsmith, you could buy a normal AR barrel, transplant the gas system onto there, which is its own beast to handle, but you know, it is actually possible. Last thing to talk about, so of course your bolt carrier in here is proprietary because this is a piston upper, so it has an integral strike face installed where the gas key normally would go on a AR-15. It's a flat strike face, interestingly, so in contrast to like the 416, this is more similar to like the Adams arms types of pistons. Now, one thing interesting is you can fit an AR-15 bolt into this T91 bolt carrier. Although it will fit, it will not headspace properly, or at least not with the one I have, because I did test it just out of curiosity. I did pop a AR-15 bolt into here, which of course I did check the headspace on this current setup as well, which T91 bolt and the T91 US made barrel, and it works perfectly. So there's pretty big differences with the dimensions. So the reason I do bring that up is because the T91 bolt in here really does resemble a regular AR bolt, including the kind of the whole taper down, which I'll put a picture of what I'm referring to, which is interesting that they did that. If you compare it to other piston systems like the HK, it doesn't really need to taper down. It could just be almost like a straight tube. Yeah, the T91 bolt looks like an AR bolt just without gas rings, which is just kind of odd. However, all the other parts on the bolt carrier are compatible with AR-15, so you can use an AR-15 cam pin, you can use an AR-15 firing pin, just the bolt and the bolt carrier. So overall, would I recommend this? To understand my reasoning when I picked this up is really just out of curiosity for mostly for two reasons. One, because it's Taiwanese and I just think that's cool to kind of collect rifles and uppers from different countries. But two, also because I think it's interesting to compare it to the 416, which I'm pretty deep into that platform, and you know, this being a different type of very homegrown Taiwanese short stroke gas piston system, it's cool to see where they differed and where they kind of are similar. But if you want this for more of like, God forbid the word duty, but if you want this for like a serious use upper, I think that there are far better options out there with a lot more compatibility. In other words, just like a normal AR, especially if you want to use this for like night vision or something. I mean, this handguard does not hold zero at all. It doesn't flex much. You probably won't see it on camera, but it's pretty much like your normal clamshell, like on the old M4s, for instance. So it won't hold zero. But I think there's just kind of a lack of QC if you want to use this for a serious use rifle. Again, because remember, with mine, I had that roughness in the barrel, and I've read of other people having roughness like in the chamber to the point where it was even worse than mine, because mine was, again, not the most smooth either. This is just a really cool rifle if you want to pick one up yourself. So thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care. See you all in the next one.